How are you guys? Right, so I'm just gonna explore, right, and look in this week's possible setups that actually played out, right? So we are looking at EURUSD now, and we're actually looking on 15 minutes time frame, right? So I have just marked the Asian sessions, right? With a box there so that we can possibly see possible setups that actually played during London session, right? During London session or New York session, right? But mostly here, I actually spotted entries from London session from the setups that were actually playing out here, right? All right. So paying attention to Monday, we actually had a supply area here, right? This was an area of interest that we could have actually paid attention to. All right, that was the supply area. So if you can see what I did here, I just marked this bearish order block, right? With with that trend line two, right? So this is the supply that we're actually looking at. This is the area of interest where we're actually expecting to take sales from, right? Because if you can look at what was happening on Friday, we can actually see that there was a break of structure that was actually given, right? There's a break of structure that was actually given on this structure, right? Showing that we are definitely going to be getting more potentials for sales on Monday, right? So if you can see with whatever that happened here, this was the most effective area where we could actually expect to actually get what a trigger for sales, right? So if you can see with what was actually happening during Asian session, right after a drop, this asset actually had to give a correction, right? It actually had to give a correction towards the gap that was created there. So if you can actually pay attention, you can definitely see that this gap was actually filled when this market actually corrected, right? So that was an imbalance there. This was actually an imbalance. This was a gap created here, right? So if you can see with what happened after Asian session closed, right? London Open, it had to push further to the upside to fill this gap, right? Which means this was the potential sell. So if we're actually paying attention to getting a 1:2 here, you could actually see that the stop loss was actually going to be going above this supply structure, right? Which means there was a possibility, a good uh, sell pattern being respected here, right? Same thing with Tuesday. You can definitely see that I have also marked my Asian box here, right? I've marked my Asian box, which is the Asian session, right? So if you can see with what happened here, we also created a break of structure, right? On Monday. So this was a break of structure created here, right? And then the market dropped further to the downside, right? The market continued dropping, right? We created a break of structure here. The market dropped to the downside, right? And then if you can see with what happened here, after breaking below the Asian low, right? Somehow the market had to correct right back to this level because there was actually an institutional candle here. This could be or could have been an opportunity again to sell towards the New York session, right? This was around 4 o'clock, right? So yeah, quarter to 4. So this was actually going to be another setup around the New York session, right? But if you could have taken entries in London session, this could just have been a 1:2 complete setup, a win right within that day, and then maybe wait for tomorrow to get another another setup again, right? This could have been a 1:2 again entry from the institutional candle here, right? And then selling towards to the end of that New York session, or towards the open of the Tokyo session, right? So if you can see with Tuesday, this is what happened. I just highlighted the Asian box, right? And then looking at the left side, we also have an area of interest, which is this area, right? This is where the supply is, right? So if you can see, we actually have a bearish order block up there, right? We have this bearish order block, also you have this bearish order block, right? So just looking at the supply, these are the highs where we actually want to see EURUSD, right, paging into, right? So this is more like a liquidity trap, right? So if you can see, when the Asian session closed, right, London opened, right, and then it dropped to the downside, all right? So if you can see, setups were actually presented exactly when this Asian session closed. This was around 10:45, right? So Asian session closed, right? And then we had to see the market going for this supply zone, right? So this was the entry, and then the market dropped to the downside, came back for the entries again, then it dropped to the downside, right? So targeting the Asian lows here, this was definitely going to be giving a 1:2 risk to reward ratio, right? So if you can pay attention to what was happening within this week, the market was actually creating a trend, right? This was a bearish trend, right? So if you can see, you also had a break of structure here again, right? That was a break of structure there, right? So here we actually pulled back for the supply here, right? And then we gave another break of structure, right? This was a break of structure created on Wednesday, right? Created on Wednesday during the Asian session. A break of structure was created, showing that we are actually expecting more sales to the downside, right? So looking for sales here, this was actually the area of interest here. This was the supply. This was the supply area of interest, right? But looking at those structures, we have a bearish order block there, right? So if you can just mark the bearish order block, you'll see that they actually came for that bearish order block, right? This was the bearish order block on 15 minutes time frame, and they actually came for that, right? And we're also seeing a point of interest here, right? Which is also an institutional candle here, where I actually marked supply, right? So if you can see, after closing the Asian session, right, London had to push to the upside, right? Push to the upside towards the point of interest, taking out or grabbing this liquidity here. And this was actually a strong potential sell area. So this entry happened around 2:30 afternoon, which was actually the New York session, right? So here the entry was exactly around or towards the New York session. So if you can see, this was the pullback, right? Expected after the break of structure. This was the pullback expected coming to the points of interest. So we have this point of interest here, we have this point of interest here. So even if you had taken an entry here, right, that was definitely going to be paying well, because it also created a good 1:2 risk to reward ratio, right? So paying attention to the trend again, you can definitely see that there was also a break of structure here, right? This was a break of structure showing that we're still expecting sales going to the downside, right? Looking at this, you can definitely see that after the break of structure, we actually went down, right? This was during the night, right? And then during the Asian session, you can actually see that during the Asian session, we also created another break of structure here. This was a break of structure created towards the Asian session, right? And slightly before it went down, it had to take this liquidity up here, right? It had to take this liquidity up here, right? We can just mark from that board candle, right? This is the liquidity that was actually expected to be taken out from those structures, right? So when the Asian session closed, it had to go up and take out the Asian highs, right? And looking at this was actually the point of interest, right? We're actually looking at a bearish order block here, right? Where we marked supply there. This was the bearish order block. And this pullback, it's what we actually expected, to take out liquidity here and also to come for this point of interest, right? And then look at sales, which was actually, and the entry was around also towards the New York session open, right? And it actually gave a good 1:2 risk to reward ratio, right? So with looking at the risk to reward ratio of 1:2 is definitely going to give you a high edge of what of winning, right? You're definitely going to be looking at more wins because you are looking at a possible risk to reward ratio, a normal risk to reward ratio, right? And then looking at Friday now, right? If you can see with what happened here, right? There was a rejection, right? This was the lowest point, right? We actually didn't create a break of structure here, right? But we created a break of structure here, right? When we're actually selling during the New York session, right? But at this point, we didn't manage to create a break of structure to continue looking at sales, right? So if you can see with what happened here, there was actually a change of market character or market shift here, right? And then if you can see with what was actually happening, the market kept on respecting these levels. It didn't manage to break below, right, this previous low, right? So looking at the Asian session, right? Looking at the Asian session, you can definitely see that the Asian session was actually buying, right? And then around London Open, right? Around London Open, right? London Open is around this point, right? The market was actually dropping to the downside, right? Dropping to the downside, dropping to the downside. And you can actually see that it actually respected this area of interest, which is an accumulation, right? So the reason why we are saying this is an accumulation, you can definitely see that the market was actually rejecting to push further to the downside, right? And then there was a change of market character here, right? Change of market character or market shift structure. Looking at this point again, we had an overall break of structure here. This was a break of structure. So someone wanted to see how this asset was definitely going to be reacting around this area of interest. So if you can see, if you can just take the gun box from this point up to this point, you can definitely see that this was the equilibrium area where we could have taken sales, right? So if you actually don't pay attention to this, you might miss out this setup, right? Expecting it to come forward for the discounted area of discounted point of interest here, right? But if you can see the structure that has been created down here, you can definitely see that it has been respecting this going upwards, right? Right. So if you can see, this market actually respected this going up, right? And this was more like a resistance broken. This structure was more like a resistance broken here, right? So if you can see, this market just respected this point of interest around the equilibrium, which was actually going to be an entry and putting your lows below the Asian session. So this was more of an ARA 50 trade, right? And average range 50 trade. So this was also going to be giving you a 1:2 risk to reward ratio. And this entry was exactly around 11:30, right? So these are the setups that actually played out within the week of 14 October, right, up until 18 October, Friday. So these were possible clear setup that played out, right, during this week on Euro USD.